The morning sun filtered through the massive glass panels of the corner office atop Thompson Tower in the financial heart of New York. William Thompson, at 45, gazed at the city he considered his personal domain. From the height of the 50th floor, people looked like ants, exactly how he saw them metaphorically, small, insignificant, and easily manipulated. "Mr. Thompson, the shareholders' meeting will begin in 5 minutes," his secretary announced over the intercom. William adjusted his Italian silk tie in the reflection of the window. His $50,000 custom-made suit was armor that set him apart from the rest of the world. Every element of his appearance had been meticulously calculated to convey power, just like every decision in his life. "Let them know I'm on my way, Emily," he replied curtly, grabbing his genuine leather briefcase. In the boardroom, 12 men and 3 women waited anxiously. The air was thick with tension. William allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. He loved the fear his presence provoked. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his deep voice filling the room. "The numbers from the last quarter are impressive but still insufficient." A murmur of unease rippled through the room. William continued, relentless. "We need to expand. The revitalization project in the East Zone is our top priority. We've already acquired 60% of the properties in the area. The remaining holdouts need to be convinced." "But sir," one of the directors interjected timidly, "there are families who have lived there for generations. Some refuse even to discuss terms." William slowly swiveled his chair, fixing the man with a cold stare. "Nathan, isn't it? Let me explain something fundamental. Everything has a price. Absolutely everything. Those who don't understand that are destined to remain in mediocrity." The silence that followed was deafening. William continued his presentation, detailing strategies and goals, numbers and projections. For him, the world boiled down to this: equations, probabilities, profits, and losses. There was no room for sentimentality or moral considerations in his calculations. After the meeting, as he returned to his office, he was surprised by an unusual scene. A woman was standing near his door, chatting animatedly with Emily. She wasn't the type of person who usually frequented that floor. Her clothes were simple, without flashy labels, but there was something in her posture that exuded a natural dignity. "Mrs. Olivia Smith," Emily quickly introduced, noticing her boss's approach. "She represents the NGO that—" "I don't meet with NGO representatives," William cut in abruptly, about to enter his office. Olivia, however, wasn't intimidated. With a serene smile, she said, "Mr. Thompson, 5 minutes of your time could change the lives of hundreds of people." Something in her voice made him pause. It wasn't pleading nor a challenge, it was a calm certainty that intrigued him. Turning, he observed her more closely. She must have been around 35, with natural brown hair tied in a simple bun and green eyes that conveyed a disarming peace. 3 minutes, he conceded, gesturing toward his office door. Olivia entered, and for the first time in years, William felt slightly uncomfortable in his own territory. She carried an aura of serenity that completely contrasted with the environment of power and ambition. "You plan to demolish the New Dawn Community Center," she began without preamble. "That space serves over 200 children and their families. We provide supplemental education, psychological support, vocational training—" "Mrs. Smith," William interrupted, "I'm well aware of the value of square footage in that area. If your concern is financial, I can assure you that—" "I'm not here to negotiate prices, Mr. Thompson," she gently interrupted. "I'm here to invite you to see our work. That's all. 1 hour of your time, to see with your own eyes what you intend to destroy." William laughed, a humorless sound. "Mrs. Smith, I have a billion-dollar company to run. I don't have time for—" "Time is the only thing we truly own, Mr. Thompson," she replied, standing up. "And how we use it defines who we really are." She placed a card on the table. "The invitation is made. May God bless you." Before he could react to the religious mention, she had already left, leaving behind only her card and a faint scent of jasmine. William picked up the card, ready to throw it in the trash, but something made him hesitate. He put it in the drawer, annoyed with himself for that momentary weakness. The rest of the day went on as usual, But that night, in his triplex penthouse in Hope Gardens, William found himself thinking about the woman from the community center. There was something different about her, something his logical mind couldn't categorize or understand. It was unsettling. Pouring himself a 30-year-old whiskey, he tried to push away those troubling thoughts. Tomorrow would be just another day of achievements and victories in the business world, or at least that's what he thought. The next morning, William woke up earlier than usual. He had slept poorly, haunted by thoughts he couldn't shake. The image of Olivia Smith and her words about time kept echoing in his mind. Irritated by his own restlessness, he decided to go to the private gym installed in his penthouse, trying to exercise that feeling through physical exercise. While running on the treadmill, he watched New York awaken through the panoramic windows. The city was his canvas of conquests, each building a testament to his success. Why then did he feel that persistent unease? Ridiculous, he muttered to himself, increasing the speed of the treadmill. Completely ridiculous. Later in his office, he caught himself several times glancing at the drawer where he had stored Olivia's card. During an important video conference with Chinese investors, his mind wandered to those calm green eyes that had challenged his worldview. "Emily," he called through the intercom after the meeting, "I need complete information on the New Dawn Community Center. Everything you can find." Half an hour later, his secretary entered with a folder. "Mr. Thompson, here it is, but there's something interesting I found. Mrs. Smith does volunteer work every Wednesday at St. Luke's Hospital. She coordinates a support project for patients undergoing treatment." William raised an eyebrow. It was Wednesday. "Cancel my afternoon." "To appointments," he ordered, surprising Emily, "and prepare the car." St. Luke's Hospital was one of the most traditional in New York, known for serving both public and private patients. William had never been there. His rare medical needs were met at ultra-exclusive private clinics. Dressed in his impeccable suit, he stood out completely from the surroundings. Following the directions of a nurse, he found the volunteer sector. He stopped at the door, observing the scene before him. Olivia was sitting in a circle with about 10 people. She wore a simple t-shirt with the project's logo and jeans. Her hair was loose today, falling in soft waves over her shoulders. She was reading something to the group, her melodious voice filling the room with a story about hope and overcoming adversity. "It's inspiring, isn't it?" an elderly lady commented beside him, startling him. "Olivia has this gift of bringing light even in the darkest moments." William didn't respond. He was mesmerized by the scene. Olivia radiated an energy unlike anything he had ever witnessed in his years of meetings with powerful and influential people. "Some say she's an angel," the lady continued. "I've seen her spend entire nights here, comforting families, praying, with patience, always with the same smile on her face." "Praying," William repeated with an automatic tone of disdain, but without his usual conviction. Olivia noticed his presence at that moment. Their eyes met and she smiled, a genuine smile that made something stir inside him. After wrapping up the session, she approached him. "Mr. Thompson, what a pleasant surprise," she said, without a hint of irony in her voice. "Have you come to see our work?" "I've come to understand," he replied, trying to maintain his usual air of control. "To understand why someone would dedicate time and energy to this." He gestured vaguely at the surroundings. "Come with me," she invited, starting to walk down the hallways. William followed, feeling strangely out of place. Olivia led him through different sections, introducing him to patients and volunteers. At each stop, he observed how she interacted with people. A gentle touch here, a comforting word there. Small gestures that seemed to make a huge difference. "How do you bear it?" he finally asked when they were alone in a hallway. "Seeing so much suffering, so much fragility." Olivia looked at him with an expression that mixed compassion and understanding. "It's not about enduring, Mr. Thompson. It's about sharing, about understanding that we are all part of something greater." "Greater?" he laughed dryly. "Do you really believe in that? In a higher power that allows all this suffering?" "I believe in a higher power that gives us the ability to love and help one another," she replied serenely. "And I believe that you wouldn't have come here if deep down you didn't feel that there's something more to life beyond numbers and achievements." William felt exposed, vulnerable. It was a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. Not since. He had learned to build his walls of cynicism and power. "The community center," he said, trying to change the subject. "Why is it so important to you?" "Because every life we touch, there is a story of hope being written," Olivia replied. "Come, see it tomorrow. I promise it will be enlightening." Her eyes sparkled with a touch of amusement as she used a word so dear to his corporate world. William found himself agreeing before he even realized it. When he left the hospital hours later, his mind was in turmoil. In the car, on his way home, he picked up his phone several times to cancel the next day's appointment, but he couldn't. That night, in his luxurious apartment, William Thompson, the man who had built an empire based on logic and numbers, discovered that he couldn't calculate the value of Olivia Smith's smile. And that terrified him more than any financial crisis he had ever faced. William parked his Porsche in front of the New Dawn Community Center at exactly 9 a.m. The contrast between his luxury vehicle and the modest buildings in the neighborhood couldn't have been more striking. He observed the two-story building with a critical eye, an old but well-maintained structure with colorful walls and a small garden at the entrance. Punctual, as a businessman should be, Olivia greeted him at the door, wearing an apron stained with paint. "Welcome to our little paradise." He adjusted his Italian suit, feeling out of place. "Mrs. Smith, I'm just here for a quick courtesy visit. Please call me Olivia," she smiled. "And as for time, well, let's let it decide for itself." Before he could protest, William found himself being pulled inside the center. The interior was surprisingly welcoming. The walls were adorned with children's drawings and motivational phrases. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with the scent of paint and school supplies. "Our first stop is the art room," Olivia announced, leading him to a spacious area where several children were painting, some seated, others standing, all focused on their creations. "Aunt Olivia!" A girl of about 8 years old ran up to them. "Look what I painted." Olivia crouched down to see the drawing, treating it as if it were a masterpiece worthy of a museum. "Sophia, it's absolutely beautiful. Would you like to show it to our visitor?" The girl looked up at William, hesitant. He found himself staring into a pair of expectant brown eyes, holding a piece of paper with a colorful painting that seemed to depict a family. "It's interesting," he said, feeling uncomfortable. "It's my family," explained Sophia Martinez, gaining confidence. "This is my mom, who works as a cleaner. And this is my brother Liam, who Aunt Olivia is helping to study for college." William Thompson glanced quickly at Olivia, who nodded discreetly. "Liam won a full scholarship for engineering," she explained. "He was our first student to get into university." They continued the tour, passing through tutoring rooms, a small library, and a computer lab where teenagers were learning basic programming. In each space, William noticed the same pattern: a special attention to detail, individualized care, and a dignity he hadn't expected to find. "How do you manage to keep all this running?" he asked, genuinely curious, as he observed a music class. "With faith, dedication, and a lot of help," replied Olivia. "Every teacher here is a volunteer. The computers were donated by companies. The school supplies come from campaigns we run. It's like a daily miracle." William scoffed at the word miracle, but even to himself, his usual disdain felt forced. In the kitchen, they found Mrs. Clara Brown, a gray-haired woman preparing lunch. "Today is Feijoada Day," she announced proudly. "You're staying for lunch, aren't you?" Before he could refuse, Olivia intervened. "Of course he is, Mrs. Brown. Mr. Thompson needs to try your cooking, which is famous throughout the entire neighborhood." During lunch, served on simple but impeccably clean tables, William found himself surrounded by children and teenagers. Contrary to his expectations, they didn't just talk about their struggles. They discussed dreams, plans, and aspirations. One boy wanted to be a doctor, another dreamed of opening a mechanic shop, and a girl enthusiastically talked about her desire to become a teacher. "You know what impresses me the most here, Mr. Thompson?" Olivia commented as they observed the activity. "How people manage to smile even when facing so many hardships. How they keep hope alive even when everything seems to conspire against them." William stirred his beans thoughtfully. The feijoada was truly exceptional, better than many he had tasted in expensive restaurants. Do you really believe this? To make a difference, that it can change these people's lives? I don't believe it, she replied simply. I see it happen every day. Like Liam, who's going to be an engineer. Like Mrs. Clara Brown, who lost her job and now runs our kitchen, teaching culinary skills to young people. Like Sophia Martinez, who overcame her trauma and found her smile again through art. At that moment, a group of children began singing in the courtyard. It was a simple song, the kind you learn in school, but there was so much genuine joy that William felt something strange in his chest, an emotion he couldn't quite name. How much? He asked abruptly. What do you mean? How much would it cost to keep this place running for a year, with all the expenses, fair wages for all the staff, new materials, updated computers? Olivia studied him for a moment. It's not for sale, Mr. Thompson. That's not how this works. Everything has a price, he insisted, repeating his usual mantra. Some things are too valuable to have a price, she replied softly. But if you really want to help, start by trying to understand the value of what cannot be bought. William opened his mouth to argue, but was interrupted by Sophia Martinez, who returned with another drawing. This time she had included a figure in a suit next to her family. It's you, she explained timidly. Aunt Olivia said you're a friend of the center now. For the first time in many years, William Thompson was at a loss for words. He looked at the drawing, at the girl, at Olivia, and felt something inside him begin, very slowly, to change. The days following the visit to the New Dawn community center were different for William. For the first time in years, he found himself questioning decisions that would have been automatic before. During an important meeting about real estate expansion, his certainties began to waver. What about the families in Hope Gardens? He asked, interrupting his operations director's presentation. How many will be affected by the project? The meeting room fell into stunned silence. Nathan Davis, the same director who had been reprimanded, days earlier nervously adjusted his glasses. Mr. Thompson, following our usual policy, we offer financial compensation. That's not what I asked, William cut in, his voice still carrying its usual authority, but with a different tone. I want exact numbers. How many families? How many children? Are there schools in the area? Community centers? Emily Johnson, who was taking notes in the meeting, watched her boss with curiosity. In 15 years as his secretary, she had never seen him ask this kind of question. Sir, intervened Michael Anderson, his financial director, if we start considering these social details, the project becomes unfeasible. The shareholders will have to understand that times have changed, replied William, surprising everyone, including himself. I want a full report on the social impact by tomorrow, and schedule a site visit for next week. After the meeting, alone in his office, William gazed at the city through his panoramic window. Sophia Martinez's drawing was on his desk. He wasn't entirely sure why he had brought it to work, but he couldn't bring himself to part with it. His phone vibrated. It was a message from Olivia. Thank you for coming to the center. Your presence made a difference for the children. He reread the message several times, feeling something strange in his chest. After a few minutes, he replied, I'd like to learn more about your work. Can we have dinner tonight? The response took a few minutes that felt like an eternity. Dinner, no, but I'll accept coffee after my volunteer shift at the hospital. William smiled, surprised by his own reaction. Great. I'll meet you there at 7 p.m. The cafe Olivia chose was simple but cozy. Nothing like the upscale restaurants William usually frequented. She was already waiting for him when he arrived, still wearing her volunteer project t-shirt. Sorry I didn't have time to dress up, she said, not sounding particularly sorry. You look perfect as you are. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Olivia blushed slightly, but maintained her calm gaze. What did you really think? Of the center, Mr. Thompson. William, he corrected. Please call me William. The conversation flowed naturally. Olivia spoke about how she started her volunteer work, about the stories of resilience she witnessed daily. William found himself surprised as he shared memories of his own childhood, the absent father, the mother who worked 3 jobs, the promise he made to himself to never be vulnerable again. "You know," Olivia said after listening intently, "sometimes our greatest strength lies precisely in accepting our vulnerability." "How do you do it?" he asked suddenly. "Maintain that faith, that certainty that there's something greater, even when seeing so much suffering. It's not a certainty, William, it's a daily choice. I choose to believe that every small act of kindness matters, that every smile we manage to bring to a sick child is a victory against the darkness." William felt his throat tighten. What if someone has spent their entire life making different choices, building walls instead of bridges? Olivia reached across the table, lightly touching his hand. The contact sent an electric current through his body. It's never too late to make different choices. The moment was interrupted by William's phone. It was Michael Anderson. Something about an emergency with the Hope Gardens project. Olivia noticed his tension. "Problems at work?" "Nothing that can't wait," he replied, turning off his phone. Another gesture he had never done before. When he dropped Olivia off at home hours later, William felt different. Light and heavy at the same time. Light from her company, heavy from the decisions he knew he would have to make. In his apartment, for the first time in years, he didn't open his laptop to check his nightly emails. Instead, he stayed on the balcony, watching the city lights. His empire had been built on cold, calculated decisions, but now Olivia's words echoed in his mind. It's never too late to make different choices. The problem was that different choices meant different consequences. And William Thompson was beginning to realize that the price of change might be higher than he had imagined. Still, for the first time in his life, he wondered if some prices might be worth paying. The boardroom was buzzing with tension that Monday morning, William had just announced the temporary suspension of the Hope Gardens project for a complete reassessment of its social impact. Reactions ranged from shock to thinly veiled outrage. "With all due respect, William," Michael Anderson spoke up, using the boss's first name in a meeting for the first time. "The investors have already been informed. Contracts have been signed. We can and we will." William cut in, feeling a sharp twinge in his temple. These headaches were becoming more frequent. "If we need to renegotiate contracts, we'll renegotiate. If some investors want to walk away, let them." Nathan Davis, who had been watching the scene with growing interest, noticed something different about his boss. The relentless man of the past few decades seemed tired? No, there was something more. "Mr. Thompson," he ventured, "perhaps we can find a middle ground. Preserve some community areas, offer proper relocation." William pressed his fingers against his temple, trying to push away the throbbing pain. "Prepare alternatives. I want proposals that benefit the community, not just our balance sheets." After the meeting, Emily entered the office with a cup of coffee and painkillers. She knew her boss well enough to recognize his signs of discomfort. "You should see a doctor," she suggested, concerned. "These headaches are becoming too frequent." "I don't have time for doctors right now," he replied, but his voice had lost its usual sharp edge. "Did Olivia call?" Emily allowed herself a small smile. In recent weeks, her boss had been asking about Olivia Smith with increasing frequency. "Yes, she confirmed lunch for today, but..." She hesitated. "The board has requested an emergency meeting for this afternoon. They want to discuss the recent shifts in the company's direction." William nodded, taking the painkillers. The board. Of course they would react. His recent decisions weren't sitting well with the majority shareholders, the same ones who once applauded him for his relentless business vision. Lunch with Olivia was like an oasis in the midst of the brewing storm. She chose a simple restaurant, specializing in home-cooked meals. William, who usually only frequented upscale restaurants, was surprised by the authentic flavor of the food. "You seem worried," Olivia observed after a few minutes of conversation. "The board isn't happy with my recent decisions," he admitted, surprising himself with his own honesty. "They think I'm changing too much." "And you? What do you think?" William reflected, feeling the pain in his temple intensify once again. "I think for the first time I'm wondering if the price of the success I've built wasn't too high." Olivia watched him with her sharp green eyes. You look pale, William. Aren't you feeling well? It's just a headache. He tried to downplay, but his voice came out weaker than usual. I've been having a few lately. You need to take care of yourself, she said, her voice blending concern and firmness. It's no use wanting to change the world if you don't take care of yourself first. Speaking as a volunteer or as... He hesitated, realizing he didn't quite know what they were to each other now. As someone who cares, she replied simply, and his heart raced in a way that had nothing to do with his discomfort. The meeting with the board was as tense as expected. William presented his arguments, defended his decisions, but he noticed that exchanged glances among the board members. Years of experience told him a conspiracy was forming. Mr. Thompson, said the chairman of the board, a white-haired man who had held the position for 3 decades, your achievements for the company are unquestionable, but in recent months your decisions have been concerning. Perhaps it's time to consider a redistribution of responsibilities. The veiled threat was clear. At stake was not just his position, but the entire empire he had built. Years ago, he would have reacted with calculated fury, mobilizing allies, preparing counterattacks. But now, the pain in his head exploded suddenly. His vision darkened for a moment. He leaned on the table, trying to maintain his composure. William? Michael's voice sounded distant. Are you okay? I need a moment, he managed to say, struggling to stand up. He didn't make it to the door. His knees gave out, and the last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Emily's worried face rushing toward him. His last conscious thought was of Olivia. There were so many things he still needed to tell her. The private room at St. Luke's Hospital was quiet, except for the constant beeping of the heart monitors. William opened his eyes slowly, trying to recognize where he was. The last thing he remembered was the meeting with the board, the searing pain, then darkness. Welcome back, a soft voice surprised him. Olivia was sitting by his bedside, a book in her lap. She looked tired, as if she had been there for hours. How long? His voice came out hoarse. 2 days, she replied, offering him water with a spoon. You gave us quite a scare. William tried to sit up but felt a strong wave of dizziness. Olivia gently helped him settle back into the pillows. The diagnosis, he asked, already thinking about how this setback would affect his business. A cerebral aneurysm, she answered delicately. The doctors say you need surgery, but... She hesitated. But? It's a delicate surgery, William, with considerable risks. He closed his eyes, processing the information. In his mind, numbers and probabilities danced. Success rates, margins of error, possible complications. There was always a logical solution, always. Where's Emily? I need my notebook. I have to organize some documents before... Emily is taking care of everything at the company, Olivia interrupted firmly. Right now, you need to rest. Night fell slowly over New York, its lights shimmering through the hospital window. Olivia had left, promising to return in the morning. William was alone with his thoughts and fears. Yes, for the first time in decades, he admitted to himself that he was afraid. That's when it happened. At first, he thought it might be an effect of the medication. The room seemed to be growing brighter, but it wasn't an ordinary light. It was something different, something he had never seen before. A presence began to materialize near his bed. The figure that formed was indefinable in human terms. It was neither man nor woman, had no specific shape, but radiated such a profound peace that William felt involuntary tears streaming down his face. Do not be afraid, the voice echoed in his mind, though no sound had been uttered. You are not alone. Who? What are you? Whispered William. I am a messenger, replied the presence. I have come to show you what you need to see. The hospital. Room vanished. William found himself floating above the city, but it wasn't the New York he knew. It was as if he could see through walls, into the hearts of people. He saw families struggling to survive, anonymous acts of kindness, hope blooming in the most unlikely places. Look, said the being of light. And William saw his own actions over the years, every cold decision, every ruthless deal, every life affected by his relentless pursuit of power and control. But he also saw something more, small moments of kindness. He had forgotten possibilities of redemption still within his reach. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Because you asked," replied the being. "Every time you looked into Olivia's eyes and wondered if there was something more to life, every moment you felt something was missing, those were silent pleas for this truth." The being extended what could be called a hand, gently touching William's forehead, right where the aneurysm was located. A sensation of warmth and peace spread throughout his body. "Your journey does not end here," said the being. "You have a greater purpose to fulfill." "But how?" asked William, feeling both stronger and more humble than he had ever felt before. "How can I fix so much?" "One step at a time," replied the being, beginning to fade away. "And William, she is right. Faith is not about certainties, it's about choices." William woke up with the first rays of sunlight. For a moment he thought it had all been a dream, but something was different. The pain had completely disappeared, and he felt renewed. The doctors came in for their morning rounds and were baffled. The tests no longer showed any sign of the aneurysm. It was as if it had never existed. "It's impossible," murmured the neurosurgeon, repeatedly looking at the scans. "Simply impossible." Olivia arrived shortly after, bringing a small bouquet of wildflowers. She found William sitting on the bed, looking out the window with a different expression on his face, softer, more serene. "Something happened last night," he said as she approached. "I know," Olivia replied simply. And from the look they exchanged, William realized she truly did know. Somehow she had always known this moment would come. "I have so much to learn," he admitted, holding her hand. "We have all the time in the world," Olivia replied, and for the first time, William truly understood what it meant to have faith. William's return to work, a week after his hospitalization, caused quite a stir in Thompson Tower. The employees, accustomed to his stern demeanor and intimidating aura, were unsure how to react upon seeing him greet everyone with a genuine smile. "Good morning, Jose." He stopped at the reception, surprising the security guard who had worked there for 15 years and had never heard his name spoken by the boss. "How is your daughter? I heard she passed the entrance exam." The man stammered, stunned. "Yes, Mr. Thompson, medicine at Harvard University." "Excellent, we need to talk about this later," replied William, leaving the security guard speechless. In his office, Emily awaited him with a stack of documents and a worried expression. "The board is in an uproar," she informed him. "The stock has dropped 5% since the announcement of the suspension of the Hope Gardens project, and there are rumors of an attempt to oust you." William nodded calmly. "Emily, could you call a general meeting for this afternoon? All employees, from the top executives to the cleaning staff." "Everyone?" she asked, surprised. "But the auditorium only holds..." "Then rent a larger space, and please get in touch with Olivia Smith. I'd like her to be present as well." At 3 p.m., the largest hall in the hotel near the office was packed. Over 500 employees gathered, curious and anxious. Olivia stood discreetly in a corner, observing everything with interest. William took the stage without papers or PowerPoint presentations. For the first time in his career, he would speak directly from the heart. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began. "First, I want to apologize. I apologize for years of acting as if you were just numbers on a spreadsheet. I apologize for forgetting that a company is not made up of profits alone, but of people." A murmur spread through the room. Michael Anderson, seated in the front row, looked like he was having a heart attack. "Starting today, Thompson Enterprises will change its way of operating. Every project we undertake must have a measurable positive social impact. We will create a foundation to manage social projects, beginning with the revitalization, not the demolition of Hope Gardens." He paused, observing the reactions. Some seemed shocked, others hopeful. Olivia smiled subtly. "We will immediately implement a new benefits package for all employees, scholarships for your children, comprehensive family health plans, real profit sharing. And yes, Michael," he addressed the CFO, who looked like he was about to faint, "this will affect our profit margin. But there are things more important than money. The next 2 hours were dedicated to detailing the changes: on-site daycare, flexible hours, incentives for volunteer work, partnerships with NGOs. With each new announcement, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Initial disbelief gave way to growing hope. After the meeting, back in his office, William received Olivia. "Impressive," she said, sitting down, "but the board won't easily accept all these changes." "I know," he replied, calmly. "That's why I'll need your help. I want you to lead our new foundation." Olivia widened her eyes. "William, I don't have corporate experience." "Exactly. You have something far more valuable. You understand the true meaning of making a difference in people's lives." She studied him for a moment. "You've really changed, haven't you?" William stood up, walking to the window. The city looked different now, no longer a chessboard where he moved pieces at will, but a living, pulsating organism, full of stories and possibilities. "Do you know what the being of light showed me that night?" he said softly. "That every decision we make creates ripples that affect countless lives. I spent years creating ripples of destruction. It's time to create ripples of hope." Olivia stepped closer, gently touching his arm. "And are you ready for the consequences? Not everyone will understand or support this change. For the first time in my life, I'm not worried about the consequences," he replied, turning to face her. "Because for the first time, I know I'm doing the right thing." At that moment, Emily hurried into the office. "Mr. Thompson, the board. Chairman is on the phone. They're calling an extraordinary meeting for next week. They want to vote on your continuation as president." William and Olivia exchanged glances. The real test was just beginning. But now, with a new perspective on life and a greater purpose guiding his actions, William was ready to face any challenge, no longer as the ruthless titan of business, but as a man who had finally found his path to true fulfillment. The day of the extraordinary meeting arrived with a tense atmosphere. The luxurious meeting hall on the top floor of Thompson Tower was packed. Board members, majority shareholders, and executives, all awaiting what promised to be a historic showdown. William arrived early, accompanied by Olivia and an unusual team. Besides his lawyers, he brought representatives from the community center, community leaders from Hope Gardens, and some of the company's longest-serving employees. "Are you sure about this?" Olivia asked, noticing the disapproving looks from some board members toward the diverse group. "Absolutely," William replied with a serene smile. "It's time for them to see the true value of the company we've built." The chairman of the board, Richard Clark, opened the session with icy formality. "We are gathered here today to discuss the recent conduct of Thompson Enterprises and evaluate the continued tenure of the current CEO." William requested the floor before the accusations could begin. He stood up calmly, but instead of heading to the designated podium, he walked to the center of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, before you vote on my removal, I would like to introduce you to some people," he began. "This is Mrs. Clara Brown, whom many of you know for the feijoada. She served at our last charity event. What you don't know is that she is one of the country's leading experts in social gastronomy, having trained over 200 young people who now work in renowned restaurants." Mrs. Clara Brown, in her simple yet elegant dress, stood up with dignity. William continued, "This is Liam Wilson, whom you saw in the corporate video, the first resident of Hope Gardens to attend university. He has already received 3 internship offers, 2 of them from our competitors." A murmur spread through the room. William went on, introducing each person he had brought, revealing stories of resilience, untapped talents, and wasted potential that his former corporate policies had overlooked. "Now," he said, pausing dramatically, "allow me to show you what we discovered when we truly studied the communities we intended to displace." Emily Johnson distributed folders to those present, while William Thompson began a detailed presentation. He showed how the participatory revitalization project of Hope Gardens, instead of displacing residents, could generate an even greater financial return in the long term. He presented international case studies, financial projections, and most importantly, the positive impact on the company's image. "Our new approach has already attracted the attention of investment funds specializing in socially responsible companies," he revealed. We received 3 international partnership proposals last week. Richard Clark interrupted, visibly irritated. This all sounds very nice, Thompson, but the shareholders, William cut in, his voice firm but not aggressive, deserve to know that while you were planning this meeting, I was negotiating with the largest social investment fund in Europe. They are willing to buy 20% of our shares at a 30% premium over the market value, on the condition that we maintain our new social direction. The room erupted in whispers and discussions. William raised his hand, calling for silence. But before formally presenting the proposal, I want you to get to know another project. He gestured, and Olivia Smith stood up, walking to his side. Our new Thompson Foundation for Social Development. For the next hour, Olivia presented a detailed plan of how the foundation would transform each of the company's real estate projects into an opportunity for social development. It wasn't empty philanthropy. It was a sustainable business model that created value for everyone involved. Gentlemen, William concluded, you can remove me today. It is your right. But know that by doing so, you will be rejecting not only the largest financial deal in this company's history, but also the opportunity to turn it into a global model for conscious business. Richard Clark cleared his throat, embarrassed. Perhaps we should discuss these proposals further before making any hasty decisions. William smiled inwardly. He knew that tone well. It was the sound of old convictions beginning to crumble in the face of new possibilities. I propose, he continued, that we turn this extraordinary meeting into a strategic planning session. We have a lot of work ahead of us. The next few hours were intense. Heated debates, questions, proposals, and counter-proposals. But by the end of the day, as the sun set over New York, the outcome was clear. William would remain as president, with a renewed mandate to implement his changes. As the executives and board members left, animatedly discussing the company's new direction, Olivia approached William. You planned all this, didn't you? She asked, amazed. And let's just say I learned to use my old skills for a better purpose, he replied with a smile. The being of light showed me that I didn't need to destroy who I was, just transform my abilities into instruments of positive change. Looking out, the window at the city that now seemed to pulse with new possibilities, William felt a deep sense of peace. Today's battle had been won, but it was only the beginning of a much larger journey. 6 months had passed since the extraordinary meeting. Hope Gardens was unrecognizable, not because of the destruction that had once been planned, but because of the positive transformation it was experiencing. The pilot project of participatory revitalization had become a case study in universities across the country. On a Saturday afternoon, William walked through the neighborhood streets with Olivia, observing the changes. The facades of the houses were renewed with vibrant colors, chosen by the residents themselves. The community center, now expanded, occupied a modern building that blended perfectly with the local architecture. Look who's here, shouted Sophia, now a mentor for the Children's Art Project. She ran to hug Olivia and, to William's surprise, hugged him too. Come see our exhibition. The old warehouse had been transformed into a community art gallery. On the walls, dozens of paintings told the story of the neighborhood through the eyes of its residents. William stopped in front of one in particular. It was the drawing Sophia had made of him, now prominently framed. This is my favorite, said Olivia, stopping beside him. It shows the exact moment you began to change. William smiled, remembering that day. Who would have thought that a children's drawing would be more valuable than all the artworks in my old collection? They continued their stroll through the neighborhood. The new central square was bustling with activity. Yoga classes, craft workshops, a small market for local products. The professional training program had already graduated its first class, and several residents had started their own businesses. William, Olivia, called Mrs. Clara Brown from her new snack bar. Come try my new cheese bread. The recipe is such a hit that I already have 3 orders for corporate events. As they savored the cheese bread, which was truly exceptional, William observed the activity in the establishment. Young apprentices worked efficiently. The place was spotless, and there was a steady line of customers, many coming from other neighborhoods, drawn by the growing fame of the local cuisine. The foundation has already received 15 requests from other communities wanting to replicate the model, Olivia commented, and 3 city councils from the countryside have approached us for partnerships. William nodded, thoughtful. The project's success had exceeded all expectations, but something still troubled him. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough," he confessed. Olivia took his hand, a gesture that now felt so natural. "You'll learn that it's never enough, and that's a good thing. It keeps us humble and constantly evolving." That night, in his apartment, William gazed out at the city. He had simplified his life considerably, selling several of his luxury possessions, keeping only what was necessary to live comfortably and invest in social projects. True wealth, he had discovered, lay elsewhere. It was then that the familiar light began to manifest. The being of light appeared clearer than the first time, its presence filling the room with a profound peace. "You have found your path," said the voice in his mind. "Thanks to you," replied William. "No," corrected the being, "you always had this light within you. You just needed to rediscover it." The being showed William visions, no longer of the past but of the future. Possibilities, paths, lives that could be transformed. "Your work is just beginning," said the being, "but now you are no longer alone." The images shifted and William saw Olivia, her serene strength, her unwavering faith, her transformative love. He saw how their paths had intertwined not by chance, but as part of a greater plan. "She is your partner on this journey," the being continued. "Together you have a greater purpose to fulfill." "How will I know the right path?" asked William. The being of light emanated what seemed like a smile. "You already know. It is in your heart now. Just trust." When the presence faded, William remained silent for a long time. He picked up his phone and typed a message to Olivia. "Can we talk tomorrow? I have an idea to expand the project." The reply came almost immediately. "Of course. I have some news too. Coffee after Mass?" William smiled. Before, the mention of Mass would have made him roll his eyes. Now, although he was still building his own relationship with spirituality, he respected and admired Olivia's faith. It was just one of the many transformations his life had undergone. He looked out at the city again. The nightlights of New York no longer seemed cold and distant. They were like earthly stars, each representing a life, a story, a possibility of transformation. And now he knew that his true purpose was to help those lights shine even brighter. A year had passed since William's first visit to the community center. The place was especially decorated that Sunday morning. Colorful flowers adorned the courtyard, chairs were arranged in a circle, and an atmosphere of celebration filled the air. It was the day of the official inauguration of the Network of Social Transformation Centers, a project that united the Thompson Foundation with various community organizations. William was adjusting the microphone on the small makeshift stage when he saw Olivia arriving. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a folder with documents. Even after so many months of working together, his heart still raced when he saw her. "The representatives from the other communities have already arrived," she informed him, smiling. "They're eager to get started." The event brought together leaders from 15 different communities, all ready to implement the social development model that had transformed Hope Gardens. But there was something else in the air, something only William and Olivia knew, a surprise that would change everything. "Ready to begin?" asked Mrs. Clara Brown, now the coordinator of the social gastronomy program that would be replicated in all the new centers. William nodded and stepped onto the stage, looking out at the diverse audience. Local residents, business people, volunteers, and representatives from other communities. He felt a deep emotion. "A year ago," he began, "I was sitting in my office, planning to demolish this place. I thought success was measured only in numbers, that progress meant destroying the old to build the new. I was completely wrong." He paused, his eyes meeting Olivia's. "It took a series of small miracles to make me see the truth. The miracle of Sophia Martinez's art, which saw me as someone better than I was. The miracle of Olivia Smith's unwavering faith, which saw light where I only saw darkness. The miracle of Mrs. Clara Brown's wisdom, which taught me that true wealth lies in what we share." William then revealed the true purpose of that gathering. It wasn't just the launch of the network of centers. It was the announcement of a complete transformation at Thompson Enterprises. Starting today, he declared, our company officially becomes a social benefit corporation. 50% of all our profits will be permanently allocated to community development projects, and more, every employee will dedicate 1 day a month to volunteer work with full pay. A murmur of surprise swept through the audience. Olivia, who only knew part of the plan, looked at him with tearful eyes. But there's more, William continued. Something I've learned on my journey here, that the greatest transformations begin with a simple choice, the choice to open your heart to new possibilities. He stepped down from the stage and walked over to Olivia, taking her hands in his. Olivia, his voice was now soft, intimate, though the microphone still captured every word. You taught me that faith isn't just believing in the unseen, but having the courage to act for something greater than ourselves. You showed me that the true miracle isn't in grand transformations, but in the small daily acts of love and compassion. To everyone's surprise, including Olivia's, he knelt down. That's why before this entire community that has helped us grow, I want to make the most important choice of my life. Olivia Smith, will you build this dream by my side as my wife? The silence that followed was broken by Mrs. Clara Brown's emotional sobs and the audience's gasps. Olivia, tears streaming freely down her face, responded with a radiant smile. Yes, William, 1,000 times yes. At that moment, something extraordinary happened. A beam of golden light broke through the clouds, illuminating exactly where they stood. Many would later say it was just a coincidence, a whim of the sun. But William and Olivia knew. It was their old friend, the being of light, giving his silent blessing. The celebration that followed went far beyond an engagement or an inauguration. It was the celebration of a complete transformation, of a man, of a community, of a way of seeing the world. The children danced, the adults embraced, and the air was filled with promises for the future. Later, as the sun was setting, William and Olivia walked hand in hand through the garden of the community center. On the main mural, Sofia Martinez's old drawing had been transformed into a colorful mosaic. The image of the man in a suit now held the hand of a woman, and both were surrounded by a golden aura. You know, Olivia said, stopping to admire the mosaic, when we first met, you asked me if I really believed in miracles. William smiled, holding her close. And now you're going to tell me I became one? No, she replied, her green eyes shining. I'm going to tell you that you were always a miracle. You just needed to rediscover it. Above them, the first stars began to appear in the New York sky. The future was full of challenges, of course. There was much work ahead, many lives to transform, many dreams to fulfill. But now they knew that the true miracle wasn't in the destination, but in the journey. And this journey they would take together, one step at a time, with faith, love, and the certainty that every small act of kindness had the power to light up the world.